Welcome back for another deep dive. We're going to tackle Scrum today, and specifically its roles and processes, based on the Scrum Study Gaius Bach 4th edition 2023 and Espanol.pdf that you sent over. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear Scrum, I immediately think software development, but I have a feeling it's much bigger than that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Scrum can be used for projects, programs, products, services, even in construction. This source material even mentions coordinating crane availability with Scrum.
Okay, wow, that is wild. But what is the main idea behind all of it?
So imagine instead of rigidly planning everything up front, Scrum is all about delivering value in short bursts and constantly adapting to change. It's really designed for today's fast-paced world where things are always changing.
That already sounds less stressful than the usual project chaos. What really stood out to me from this source was that Scrum emphasizes people over processes. What's the thinking behind that?
It's all about creating a high-trust environment where the team really takes center stage, not a rigid process. You have three primary roles that really drive this: the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the Scrum team.
So we have a product owner who makes sure we're building the right thing, a Scrum Master who keeps the team on track, and the actual Scrum team doing the work. Simple enough, right?
On the surface, yes. But here's where it gets really interesting. How does Scrum handle the inevitable changes that just happen in any project? And how does it scale for massive projects that span entire companies? This source dives deep into these questions, and you'll be surprised by how elegantly Scrum tackles them.
That is exactly what I was wondering. Like, scaling this up from a small team seems pretty daunting. Before we jump into all those complexities, let's break down the core principles that really make Scrum tick. What makes it so adaptable and efficient?
Well, you can think of Scrum as being built on three pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation.
Almost like a scientific experiment.
Precisely. Just like in science, you need clear visibility into what's happening. You have regular check-ins to really assess progress, and then the willingness to adjust based on those findings.
So transparency ensures that everyone's on the same page about goals, progress, any roadblocks. Then inspection means regularly reviewing the work, like through those daily stand-up meetings that I've heard about.
Yeah, you got it. Those stand-ups, along with other events like sprint reviews, allow the team to really inspect their work, their processes, and identify any areas for improvement.
And adaptation, that's where the team makes adjustments based on what they learned.
Exactly. And remember, this is a key difference between Scrum and traditional methods. Instead of fearing change, Scrum embraces it. It's designed to respond to changes in requirements, market conditions, those unexpected challenges that just come up.
Yeah, that's a huge shift from the stick to the plan no matter what mentality that I think a lot of us are used to. But how do these principles actually play out in the real world?
That's where this concept of sprints comes in. Imagine your project broken down into these manageable chunks of work, typically 1 to 4 weeks long, each with specific deliverables.
So instead of trying to map out the entire project up front, Scrum breaks it down into these sprints. Each one is like a mini project.
You got it. Each sprint follows a specific set of processes, starting with planning and estimating. And this is where that collaborative nature of Scrum really shines.
Does the whole team just huddle up and decide what goes into each sprint?
It's definitely a team effort, with the product owner leading the charge. They work with the team to select the most valuable items from the product backlog. Think of it as like a prioritized wish list of everything the project needs.
So the product owner gets to decide what gets tackled first. Sounds like a pretty powerful role.
Absolutely. They're the voice of the customer, ensuring the team builds the right things. However, it's not a dictatorship. The team provides input on feasibility and estimates effort, often using techniques like story points or planning poker.
Okay, story points and planning poker. Those definitely need some explaining. What are we talking about?
Think of it as like a fun way to gauge effort. With story points, the team assigns these abstract units to represent the complexity of a task. And imagine using playing cards to vote on how much effort a task might take. That's planning poker in action.
That is way more engaging than the endless spreadsheet debates I'm used to. It really seems like Scrum values people and their input.
It absolutely does. Once the team has a plan and their estimates, they commit to delivering those features by the end of the sprint. And to stay on track, that's where those daily stand-up meetings come in.
Oh, the legendary stand-up. So everyone huddles in a circle and rattles off what they've done and what roadblocks they're facing?
That's the gist of it. It's a quick, focused meeting, usually no more than 15 minutes, designed to keep everyone in sync and keep the sprint moving forward. And the Scrum Master plays a key role here. They facilitate the meeting and help remove those pesky roadblocks.
Okay, so we've got sprint planning, daily stand-ups to keep things on track, and then the actual work happens. What happens at the end of a sprint?
That's when we have the sprint review and retrospective, two separate but equally important events.
So the sprint review is where the team gets to show off their accomplishments,
Mhm.
and the retrospective is all about figuring out how to do even better next time.
Exactly. The sprint review is like a mini celebration. The team showcases their work to the product owner and stakeholders, gathers feedback, and makes sure they're aligned with those overall goals.
A little bit of, look what we did, and a little bit of, are we still on the right track?
You got it. Then comes the retrospective, where the team reflects on what went well, what could be improved, and how to make the next sprint even smoother. It's all about that continuous learning and improvement.
Okay, we've covered the sprints, the planning, the daily check-ins, and the end-of-sprint events. Are we missing anything crucial?
While we've touched on the Scrum roles, I think it would be helpful to dive a little deeper into their responsibilities. The success of Scrum hinges on having the right people in these roles, and each brings a unique set of skills to the table.
Let's do it. I'm eager to hear more about what each role entails and why they're so vital to making this whole Scrum thing work.
Let's start with the product owner. They're the champion of value and the ultimate decision maker when it comes to the product. Think of them as the bridge between what the customer needs and what the development team creates.
So they make sure the team is building the right thing. But how do they actually know what that is? I mean, do they just go with their gut?
Not at all. They rely on a deep understanding of customer needs and the market. They're constantly conducting research, talking to users, and just analyzing data to build a clear picture of what delivers the most value.
So it's not just about like adding features, it's about delivering true value. Makes sense.
And all of this research and insight gets translated into the product backlog, that prioritized list of everything the project needs.
All right, the product backlog. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It sounds like the product owner has their hands full keeping that up to date and making sure everything is prioritized correctly.
They do. It's a big responsibility. The product owner creates and maintains the product backlog, ensuring it reflects the latest understanding of what's most valuable to the customer. And this source material actually highlights how crucial it is to select the right person for this role because their decisions directly impact the project's success.
Yeah, you wouldn't want just anyone making those calls. What about the Scrum Master? What's their main focus?
The Scrum Master is all about enabling the team to work effectively. Imagine them as a coach, a facilitator, and a protector all rolled into one. They guide the team through the Scrum process, remove obstacles, and foster a collaborative environment.
So they're not actually building the product themselves. They're more like the oil that keeps the machine running smoothly.
That's a great way to put it. They're the guardians of the process, making sure the team follows Scrum principles and practices. But they also shield the team from distractions and external pressures, letting them focus on delivering value.
That sounds like a really delicate balancing act. They need to be firm about the process, but also super supportive of the team.
Exactly. They motivate the team, celebrate successes, and aren't afraid to have those tough conversations when needed to address any issues hindering progress.
Okay, definitely not a passive role. Now, what about the Scrum team themselves? What makes them different from a regular project team?
The Scrum team is a self-organizing unit, meaning they're empowered to manage their own work and make decisions. They're typically cross-functional, with a mix of skills like development, design, testing, and so on.
So they have all the expertise they need to take a task from start to finish without having to wait on other departments.
That's the beauty of it. This self-sufficiency is one of the things that allows Scrum teams to be so efficient. And the source material actually highlights the importance of having both generalists and specialists within the team. That mix allows them to handle a wider range of tasks and ensures they have the depth of knowledge to tackle those complex challenges.
Generalists and specialists. That's a powerful combination. But earlier we talked about how Scrum emphasizes people over processes. So are interpersonal skills just as important as technical expertise in a Scrum team?
Absolutely. This source material really stresses that those soft skills are crucial for a self-organized team. You need trust, open communication, and that collaborative spirit for a Scrum team to truly thrive.
So it's not just about individual brilliance, it's about working effectively as a team.
Exactly. Independence, self-motivation, and a customer-centric mindset are all essential for a successful Scrum team.
I'm starting to see why so many people rave about Scrum. It's really about empowering teams and creating an environment where everyone can shine. But how does this all work when you scale it up to larger, more complex projects? Earlier, you mentioned something called Scrum of Scrums, which sounded pretty intriguing.
That's a great question. And it's where things get a bit more intricate. You might think you need to completely overhaul this system for those larger projects, but the beauty of Scrum is that the core principles remain the same.
Really? But how can those short sprints and daily stand-ups possibly work when you have multiple teams, maybe even at different locations, all working on the same project?
The key lies in managing dependencies and communication. That's where Scrum of Scrums comes in. It's essentially a way to coordinate multiple Scrum teams that are working together on a larger project.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, it's like having a meta Scrum team made up of representatives from each individual team, and they meet regularly to make sure everyone is on the same page and address any dependencies or issues that might arise between teams.
Precisely. It's about keeping everyone aligned and informed, even in a really complex multi-team environment. And as projects grow even larger, you might see additional roles emerge, like a chief product owner or a chief scrum master.
A chief product owner, so like a product owner for the product owners.
Exactly. They're responsible for that overall vision and strategy, while the individual product owners focus on specific parts of the project. It's all about maintaining a unified direction.
This is fascinating. It sounds like scaling Scrum isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about applying those core principles of transparency, inspection, and adaptation to a larger scale.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of careful thought about communication and how those teams are going to work together.
You're absolutely right. And this brings us to another interesting aspect you mentioned earlier, the human element of Scrum.
Ah, yes. This source material actually mentions some human resource theories that are relevant to Scrum. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Well, since Scrum is all about people, it makes sense that these theories would come into play. One of the theories that's mentioned is Tuckman's stages of group development. It outlines how teams evolve over time, from their initial formation to a high-performing unit.
Okay, I remember learning about Tuckman's model. There's forming, storming, norming, and performing, right?
That's it. And this is incredibly relevant to Scrum teams. They often go through these stages as they learn to work together and gel as a unit.
So the Scrum Master can use this knowledge to guide the team through those stages and help them become high-performing more quickly.
Exactly. By understanding where the team is in their development, the Scrum Master can adjust their approach and provide the right support at the right time.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. What I find particularly interesting is how this source connects Tuckman's model to the importance of a high-trust environment in Scrum.
That connection is key. Open communication, psychological safety, feeling safe to take risks and share ideas, these are all essential ingredients for a high-performing Scrum team. And when you have that level of trust, it makes it so much easier to navigate those potentially tricky storming and norming phases and reach that performing stage where everyone is really clicking.
It's all starting to make sense. Scrum's focus on people, collaboration, and understanding team dynamics. It creates an environment where everyone feels valued and empowered to do their best work.
You've hit the nail on the head. And ultimately, that's what leads to successful projects and happy customers. But it's important to remember that Scrum, like any framework, isn't a magical solution. It has its challenges and limitations.
Oh, that's interesting. I was wondering if there was a catch. What are some of the challenges or criticisms that people raise about Scrum?
One common criticism is that it can feel too rigid for some organizations or projects. The strict time boxes and predefined roles can be a hurdle, especially for those used to more traditional approaches.
I can see how that might clash with certain company cultures. What else?
Another challenge is that implementing Scrum effectively requires proper training and buy-in from everyone involved. It's not just a set of rules to follow, it's a shift in mindset and culture.
It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You can't just slap a Scrum label on a project and expect everything to magically fall into place.
You're exactly right. It takes effort, commitment, and a willingness to learn and adapt. And even then, there will be bumps in the road. But the potential benefits are significant, especially when you compare it to traditional methods that often lead to delays, cost overruns, and unhappy customers.
So it's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. Are there situations where Scrum might not be the best fit? What about projects or industries where its flexibility might not be an advantage?
That's a great point. It's crucial to consider the context before diving headfirst into Scrum. For instance, Projects that require a high degree of predictability or have strict regulatory requirements might not be well suited for Scrum's iterative and adaptable approach.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. It's a powerful framework, but it's not a silver bullet. The key is to understand its principles, processes, and potential challenges, and then carefully evaluate whether it's the right fit for your specific needs.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I have a much better grasp of what Scrum is all about, and I'm excited to explore how I can apply these principles to my own work.
That's fantastic. And remember, the learning never stops. The world of Scrum is constantly evolving, with new insights and best practices emerging all the time. Stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you and your team.
Great advice. What stands out to you from our deep dive today? What's like the most important takeaway you want to leave our listener with?
For me, what's fascinating is how Scrum embraces change and empowers teams. It's a framework that prioritizes people, promotes collaboration, and delivers value efficiently. It's not just about processes, it's about creating a better way of working.
That's a great way to sum it up. And it highlights that Scrum is about creating a work environment that is both productive and enjoyable. So if you're looking for a way to boost your team's performance, deliver better results, and have more fun along the way, Scrum might just be the answer you've been searching for. Okay, you've sold me on this whole Scrum idea, but I have to admit I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. There's a lot to take in, and it almost seems like there's a whole new language to learn. Like, where do you even begin with all of this?
Yeah, it's totally understandable to feel that way at first. There is a lot to unpack. But remember, Scrum is ultimately about simplicity and continuous improvement. You don't need to become a Scrum Master overnight. You can start with the basics and build from there.
That's reassuring to hear.
Mhm.
So where would you suggest someone start if they are brand new to all of this?
Well, the Scrum Study Guide you provided is an excellent resource. It offers a very thorough overview of everything from those core principles to the processes and rules involved.
Right, the guidebook. Is there anything else you'd recommend? Maybe something a bit more, I don't know, approachable for a beginner.
Absolutely. There are tons of resources out there, blogs, podcasts, online courses. You can even look for local Scrum user groups. The key is to find what clicks for you and start experimenting.
Experimenting? What do you mean by that?
Well, Scrum is all about adapting and figuring out what works best for your specific team and the type of projects that you're working on. Don't be afraid to try different techniques, tweak the processes a little bit, and, learn from your mistakes along the way.
So it's about finding the right flavor of Scrum that kind of fits your needs.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. Scrum emphasizes continuous improvement, so embrace that learning process and don't be afraid to iterate and evolve as you go.
I love that perspective. It takes the pressure off of being perfect right out of the gate. Speaking of continuous improvement, the source material mentions something called technical debt as a challenge in like traditional project management. How does Scrum help avoid that trap?
That's a great question, and it is a key advantage of Scrum. Imagine technical debt as the cost of taking those shortcuts or making poor design choices early on in a project. It can really slow you down later and make future changes a lot more difficult and expensive.
Kind of like building a house on a shaky foundation. You might save time at the beginning, but it will definitely come back to bite you later.
Exactly. Traditional methods often contribute to technical debt because things like testing and integration happen so late in the game. This means that problems are often not discovered until it's too late and way more costly to fix.
So how does Scrum actually tackle this problem?
Well, Scrum's iterative approach helps to prevent technical debt from piling up. By incorporating testing and integration into each sprint, you can identify and address issues early on before they become those major headaches.
So it's like preventative healthcare for software development. Take care of those small problems before they become the big ones.
That's a great analogy. And this benefits both the development team and the end user. The team gets to work with cleaner, more manageable code, and the user gets a higher quality product that's easier to maintain and evolve over time.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely seeing the appeal of Scrum now. It seems like a much more sustainable and efficient way to work.
It is. And that's the beauty of Scrum. It's about working smarter, not harder, and creating a better experience for everyone involved.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. I've learned so much, and I'm excited to explore how I can actually incorporate Scrum into my own projects.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, we're here if you have any questions or need guidance as you embark on your Scrum journey.
Thanks so much for all the insights. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has really sparked your curiosity and given you a solid foundation to explore the world of Scrum. We'll see you next time.
Until next time, happy Scrumming.